You are listening to Down Home.
Episode 7, The Artistry of Blackness. In this episode of Down Home, we talk to Walter Borden about the origins of his acting career and his early days of activism. Welcome to another episode of Down Home. I'm Jason Jones, and of course, as always, we have Derek Wise. Today is a special day for us because we have Walter Borden, who is going to be our guest today, and Walter is an actor, poet, playwright, has been doing stage for many years, and has been in the beginning of Nova Scotia's sort of Black activism. He was at the forefront of that, and he's going to be our guest today. And I hope you enjoyed, everyone. So, hello, Walter.
Hi, everybody, Nova Scotia.
Yes, we're in the house. Now, I want to start off with a question of what drew you into acting and what made you choose to make it a career?
Well, to tell you the truth, I wasn't drawn into it. It just was. I even remember the day that it was. It was in 1953. I was in grade 6. It was the Christmas play at Temperance Street School in New Glasgow. And the role that I was to play was a town crier. And it was a Christmas Eve, and he was going around ringing his bell to say 7 o'clock and all is well, 7 o'clock and all is well. And I remember coming out on the stage, ready to do my little lines and whatever. And I looked down and I saw my mother, 2 of my aunts, and an uncle sitting there. And while the words that I had to say and the stuff I had to do, I was doing and saying, another side of my mind went over there and was analyzing what I was saying. Now, it's almost as if I'm standing there right now. It's that vivid.
Wow.
There's the rest of the room, faces that I didn't know, but I knew these faces. And I'm looking at them. And what I saw was these people who I saw every day of my life looking at me as if they knew me but didn't know me. And my mind is trying to process that. And at that 1 second, I knew that this was what I wanted to do, what I was supposed to do. But even in that little child's mind, the thing that really hit me was how powerful this little thing that I was doing really was. Because if I could take and create that for these people, my mother, my aunts, who saw me every day, and take them out of that knowing into this little place of not knowing, but riveted and thinking, I knew it was extremely powerful. And that because it was that powerful to do that, it was also very dangerous.
Wow.
And that I would have to watch out about that danger.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I knew I was going to do acting, but never told anybody anything, because how could I? This was totally foreign, like totally foreign, and remained that way and just went along with the flow, because I was supposed to be a doctor.
Oh, wow.
And I went to university and took my first year pre-med. I was still going to be a doctor. because that was what the community expected of me. And that was a big thing at that time. And I certainly didn't want to let them down. So I kept presenting them with the grades and the marks and the da, so they could keep on with their fantasy. While over here, without knowing how I was going to attain this thing, I knew that that was going to be where I had to go. And so what happened was that I was offered a role in a play in university. I got these reviews for it. That was a little reminder that, yeah, you're on the right track. You're on the right track. Okay.
Oh, wow.
So then I switched to education, get a teacher's degree, because I had to have something there. Meanwhile, and then just over the years, fell into the hands of certain people in Halifax, Jenny Archibald, Evelyn Garbery, who they just took me and molded me in at Pawn Playhouse out there in Jollymore, and gave me this foundation.
Wow.
And then the rest developed, but developed in conjunction with, because the moment that they got a hold of me, so did the Nova Scotia Project got a hold of me at exactly the same time. So.
Wow. Well, I mean, that actually plays well into my next question. And as a person of color, what were the challenges did you see in systemic racism? How did that play in your career, like versus like Nova Scotia versus like the United States? Because I imagine you traveled all over the place in different productions, so you must have seen a lot. And
Oh yeah,
being Black must have certainly had its challenges.
Well, you know, they certainly did, and I was aware of them, but they, you see, once again, this is where the activism came in. That nothing that I was confronted with in the artistic side really blew my mind, because I was dealing with that every day on the activist side. It was no different. Whatever impediments were placed in front of someone who was, say, going to go into any other profession, those same impediments were placed in front of me. And because I was dealing with those things on a daily basis on the behalf of others, nothing blew my mind. What it did was the work that I was doing, say, with Nova Scotia Project, with Quacha House and all that, strategizing, I could use the same strategy over here in my own life in dealing with what I was running up against in the professional side. But recognizing also at the same time that although it was the same things with which we are confronted today as Black artists, it was even more dynamic then for me, although I didn't think of it in terms of comparisons, because how could I? That was then, this is now. But when I look at it in hindsight, the major difference was that, as far as I was concerned in Nova Scotia, for many years, I was the only professional Black actor, card-carrying equity actor, the only one east of Montreal. There was nobody else.
Interesting.
You see?
Of course.
But I didn't belabor that on behalf of myself, because of what I was doing in Nova Scotia Project. I automatically knew that my job was to change the situation. It'd be the same as if we were going out and doing testing on housing, or working with drugs and all that. Applied over here, I had to understand, okay, there are people out there, young people, you worked with them, you know, they have this ability. They tell you what their dream is. Now, what you have to do is to help create an environment in which that can flourish. So that's why I started paying close attention to such things as isolating among my colleagues, my coworkers, people who I'm going to call on in a little while, because I'm going to need your help to do something here. I could remember very clearly, we were doing God's Trombones for the first time in 1983. And it was being done by a theater company that we call Quacha Playhouse. It was our first production. And this is what I mean by strategizing. I knew that I had to use the abilities of these potential young performers. I had to use the abilities that they had first to open a pathway for them, i.e., God's Trombones were chosen for one reason. The bulk of the work was on the shoulders of the old preacher. Automatically, I knew that the choir that he had to have was to be built on the choirs as we know them. They weren't just singers, they were actors. Those choirs interacted. It drove the story of the main actor, who was the preacher, but it was set in a milieu that was very comfortable to them. So they could act and not even know they were acting.
Right.
They were concentrating on their singing. But I knew that the acting was automatically going to come out. And so that's what happened. But at that same time, in that same year, I just happened to see on television the production Gospel at Colonus. And so what became my driving thing was to have that production done at Neptune Theater. But in order to do it, I needed the place, the production company behind it, everything from Neptune. I needed to see that there was a Black musical director, absolutely necessary. There was none around. So I'll just put that back here somewhere. The short and long of it was, that was in 1983. The planning, all that, getting the potential together. That took 15 years.
Wow.
But nobody knew that's what was going on. So in 1998, everything was in place. Neptune had the artistic director who was 100% behind it, which brought all the facilities of Neptune behind it. They came into contact with Woody Woods, through other work that we had done. And Woody was the perfect musical director for the piece. And so everything was fun. And I could remember the day going there on the first day that we all went on stage. We're getting ready now for our tech week. And I stood down in the audience while all the actors are coming in on the stage, and all that energy, and I'm just standing there looking, and I'm thinking, all those years when there was one Black actor on that stage, and I'm looking at 36.
Wow, that's amazing.
That is amazing. Yeah.
That is amazing. You've talked about Quacha House a couple of times now.
Yeah.
speak to us about the impact that it had on your life. Even speak to us a little bit about Rocky Jones and
Oh, yeah.
the setting up of Quatch House as well.
Well, you see, it has to be remembered that Quatcha House was the youth wing of the Nova Scotia Project. And the Nova Scotia Project as an entity was like the forerunner of so many things. They were the ones who really laid the groundwork for drug dependency group, for housing, for all of it. And one wing of it was directed toward youth.
Mm-hmm.
And so we call that Quatcha House and made it an entity then unto itself. But it functioned in direct, correlation with the Nova Scotia Project, because the kids from Quatcha House, they took part in everything that took place with Nova Scotia Project on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
And but so in Quatcha House, as I say, because it was directed to the youth, we could teach them not only and give them the opportunity not only to do their own thing in how they saw it, but bring them into contact with those people who would be the immediate mentors for them. Whether we are talking about, education programs, after school teaching, we had professors from St. Mary's and come down and tutor these children, these young people. This is a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
But those young people were taught to have a voice. And I could remember we went one year to a huge conference in Kitchener-Waterloo. And that was the first time that we took them as a group of them, and put them in the midst of people like Saul Alinsky and that type.
Mm-hmm.
And watch them perform. Now, we had told them, instructed them that, number one, when you don't understand something, make no difference who's saying it, you tell them that you don't understand what they're saying. So would they please take it and put it into some form that you can understand? If you're going to be talking to me, at least talk to me so that I can understand. This is what they, and so now here they are in the midst of these people. These were the top, activists of the day, Timothy
Mm-hmm.
Leary, Saul Alinsky, these people.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the first opening session, and they were, the people, the organizers were laying out this agenda, because this would be a week-long thing, and this was going to take place here, and they were speaking in all this language that, we understood because we had to deal with it all the time. They didn't. Now was the great test. Were they going to say anything? Well, indeed they did. Just put up their hands to one, it says, I don't know what the F you're talking about. So, and the people just like, well, what they did was they adjourned the meeting and went back and redid their scheduling.
Right.
It was that kind of thing. These young people, they had reached that stage, you see,
Mm-hmm.
and they were going to meetings like this. They were performing at Expo 67. They were all that.
Amazing. 2020, as you are, it's been a challenging year. Do you see any parallels between the activism from the 60s and 70s and what went on this summer?
Oh, yes, and it did my heart good. Been waiting for years for it to see it. Because we were very, very, very aware. And I used to talk, used to talk regularly before she passed with Joan Jones about this. And of course, the situation there was that Joan and I would talk because we were the last of the group. I mean, you know, there are many, you know, who came afterward. This is the thing. There's the group of people that you who are the spokespeople now, bless them, but they are not the originals.
Mm-hmm.
They are the ones whom we taught.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the big thing is that bothered Joan and me is that we saw a gap. We saw a gap between from beginning in the late 70s, right straight through a couple of generations until we hit Black Lives Matter.
Really?
Okay.
Wow.
And we often analyzed what had happened. Well, what had happened was really quite simple. One of the things that we always tried to teach in the group was this. You have to be very aware of how powerful the enemy is. Don't underestimate them. They are as smart or smarter than you. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And by that, I mean, we already knew, beginning in America, for instance, after the Nixonian era, and during it, what was being done to neutralize activism. We saw what had happened with the Panthers. Those were our friends. Those were people we read about, you know. Stokely sat at our table and discussed, you know, we had discussions with Harry Belafonte, with the, you know, these were our friends. We knew what was going down, and we saw when they were being killed, blown away. Watch your enemy. We also tried to teach them that, you know, it won't always be so blatant as wiping you out. No, coercion is the even bigger enemy.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
I will give you this. You will interpret it as having made a step forward. I know that it's a piece of cheese on a rat trap. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I am now biding my time. I am like the forest fire. You think you have extinguished it? I have gone underground, and I will burn for years before I pop back up. We try to teach them, understand that. But we also know that people are people. Human conditioning. If I make you believe that you are now safe, that you have made strides, I also know that you're going to start living according to the strides that you think you have made. And then you can't get out of it because you have a life that you have to support. And then it becomes, and I tell you this, every time I'd sit and listen to people talk, I'd listen to what phrases they would use. And there is no phrase that drives me crazier than we have come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. Yeah. You know, don't say that to me.
Yeah.
When I know we haven't come anywhere.
Right.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's very interesting.
You know, and these are the reasons we haven't come, because these other things were being put in place. And suddenly a generation has gone by, and that sense of comfort with a tinge of, but, you know, keep reminding that you're aware that there is stuff to be done. So that's supposed to send a little bit of fear into the enemy that, you're not quite asleep yet. Okay.
Mhm.
So that's now into the next generation, which is now the second removed from the original teaching. And you watch the repercussions and repercussions. And then a catalyst happens.
Right.
You never know what the catalyst is going to be, as to tell them. In the 50s, the catalyst was Rosa Parks saying no. Nobody knew that Viola Desmond had said the no 10 years prior.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
another thing. Timing is everything. Timing is everything. And so Rosa said it, and suddenly a generation, the generation that has the energy, they suddenly started repeating her no, and the no went right around the world.
Mhm.
Okay? We go forward a few generations. There was another no, but it was a different no. The no was, you're killing me.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same no.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it went around the world.
Yeah.
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 And you had Black Lives Matter.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, took that long, but what is time in the universe? That's a blink of an eye as far as it's concerned.
Mhm.
And it will happen at the precise moment it's supposed to happen, because the universe moves mindless about us. It's all summed up into, no doubt the universe is unfolding as it should.
Mm-hmm.
And 50 years to you might bring you well into your breaking point. But as far as the universe is concerned, it hasn't even blinked an eye.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's interesting. Your parallel about the black leaders being taken away from the movements back in the 60s is very interesting, because one of the interesting things about Black Lives Matter is that there are no discernible leaders.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it's almost as if the movement has learned from the mistakes of well, not mistakes, but the happenings of the past.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
Because you see, one of the things that has evolved and developed along with, what I could call the philosophies and the psychologies of thinking that pervade different movements at different times is this. We fall prey to instructions again from outside, instructions that are dangerous to us. For instance, the whole movement, one of the movements about that evolved, and you must understand too, that the strategies of virtually all movements, whether they be feminist movement, whatever, all great movements, but they all took their instructions from what was laid, the strategies that were laid out by the activists in the 50s and 60s.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Everybody took them.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a flashback to the teachings that I referred to as watch what your enemy's up to. Watch. Because they would take a strategy. They had their own thing that they wanted to deal with. They would incorporate us so far for numbers, for profile.
Mhm.
But then you watch and see who it is benefiting.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And then you have to make those very hard decisions about, wait a minute. At the end of the day, no matter what you have hooked yourself into, say some movement, and I'm not saying that that movement does not have credibility and necessity, but you have to find out and admit to yourself just where you stand in that movement.
Mhm.
And when you find that regardless of what the movement is, it's still strategized according to color,
Mhm.
according to gender. When you look and you say, oh my God, we're still on the bottom rung. Yeah. And not we're on the bottom rung. Say you're talking about the feminist movement. The bottom rung is the Black woman.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I can't help it if people get all bent out of shape about it. When you look at it, it is true.
Mhm.
It was true with the suffragettes. It was true with every movement that has grown out of using the strategies of Black activism to address their particular concern
Mhm.
and utilize us as fodder
Yeah.
to advance their particular thing, which I take as a double insult, because it's not that I don't understand and appreciate what your concern is.
Mhm.
I'm saying, how dare you think, even suggest that I don't have the wisdom to understand how my own strategies are working for you. And you at the same time think that I'm not going to have the brains enough to figure that out,
Mhm.
and we'll just
Yeah.
go along with it.
Yeah. Yeah. This is why, conversations like this are important. And me and Jay were talking about this a couple of days ago about our motivations for putting this podcast together. And they're much in line with what you're talking about. It's us finding our voice
Mhm.
and putting our voices to this conversation in the way that we see fit.
Totally. And not only finding the voice, but recognizing that the voice is not only necessary, but is in fact the voice. Nobody can erase the fact that I am the authority on who I am.
Yes.
That's powerful. Yeah.
You have to understand that,
Mhm.
Mhm.
that I
And
am not and will not define myself according to your rule.
yeah.
That's
And
awesome.
if you say to me that I am on equal footing with you, and fine, well, number one, you don't even go there with me, because I say I'm not elevating myself to anything. But no, I am not on equal footing with you. I possess information that you do not have. I know you. You don't know me because you never had to know me. It wasn't
Mhm.
necessary. I
Mhm.
had to know me. My ancestors, my parents, my grandparents had to teach me to know me, or I would be dead. We call it my survival kit. You
Mhm.
don't need one.
Yeah. It's true.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, that's true. It's in that conversation that they've put names to it, that white privilege, you know.
Mhm.
This conversation that I have to have with my son and my daughter about who they are and what their role is and how they have to behave in certain situations.
Yes.
There are white kids out there that or white parents that do not have to have that. They have the privilege not to have that conversation with their kids.
Mm-hmm.
That is
Yeah.
what white privilege is.
Well,
Exactly.
yeah. And just Black history, Black families, there's always been an oral history, and the way that we passed on the information from generation to generation. And that was another reason why we started this podcast, was to know that strength that we did come from, my Uncle Rocky, and Aunt Joan and my great grandfather Sidney Jones, they saw all those things, and now I am finding myself really sort of tapping into that voice, and I'm starting to hear it now, and because of what is going on in the world today. And just like Derek was saying, he learned the same thing, and he is able to pass that wisdom on to the next generation, because that's really, it started at Kawacha House. You kept on teaching the youth so they can provide it to the next generation, and that's how we grow strong in our community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And the utter necessity, because this is what we also talk. Listen, it is not good enough to just continually regurgitate what I say or what we said. First of all, before you regurgitate it, you must be absolutely sure that what we said is factual.
Mm-hmm.
Always do your research.
mm-hmm.
I say when I'm talking to young people, don't believe what I say. What you're supposed to do is prove me wrong. Now, that means you have work to do. And you might very well prove me wrong. That's all right. Because what I want to tell you is that my whole philosophy is as malleable as anything. It is always searching for a new ingredient to morph it into something. The new ingredient can come from something that you found. You injected into my philosophy. I don't reject it. I accept it and let it mold into something else. Right. But what happens is that you get a group of people who just repeat, regurgitate, and so what the ultimate thing that happens when that is the motivation is that it solidifies, hardens into something, and that something can contain all kinds of error that will never get changed because you haven't remained malleable and kept doing your research.
Well, that's very good advice, I'd have to say.
Yes, indeed.
Well, this has been a fantastic conversation, Walter. I thank you very much for coming on and talking with us. As I was saying to you previously, you are a jewel to our community in Nova Scotia. You are a precious jewel, a precious gem. And the words that you've spoken today, we're going to do our best to get out there in the airwaves in our podcast. And thank you very much.
Well,
yes, it was really inspiring to hear just the wisdom and the strength that you possess and continue to have. And we were lucky to interview you today. So thank you very much.
Take us out.
Yes, and so give it up today for Walter Borden and Derek Wise and myself, Jason Jones. It's been another good episode of Down Home, and we look forward to sharing this with you soon. Take care. Thank you.
Bye-bye. You have been listening to Down Home. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. The song Breaking New Ground from The Breakdown.
On a high plateau, from the one down below to the future of the funk.